Okay, so let's take an overview of what this webinar is about, and it's a 90-minute webinar. We start on time and we end on time. If anything, we might end earlier, but we try not to end later. Okay, and we have to discuss what is quality management and that COPIS model. Then we'll talk about the COPIS approach and the quality management requirements. Both Patrick and myself will present on that. And then we have some self-assessment questions for you, just for your eyes only, just for your eyes only. We just think you need to understand, just that's recognizing current gaps in your organization. And so what we ask is that you have pen and paper or you have your phone ready to record your answers. And Devindra, if you could say something about this at this point, we'd appreciate that with regard to the self-assessment questions. Dev?
Okay, thanks, Betty. Welcome to all. So with the self-assessment questions, you would be recording the number of your response, and at the end of the session, we will do a quick total. And when I say we, each of you individually would add up your scores, and then we will give you the criteria for assessing what you would have scored for your organization. Thanks, Betty.
Thank you so much, Devindra. And then we have to talk about the next steps. This is the first step. You know, we're sensitizing leaders of the CSOs, of the NGOs. And then you know us. If you have been in any of our webinars, you know we're about giveaways. And so we have some gifts, but we have to organize that in a little competition to be able to give away those gifts. So competition rules will explain closer to the time. And then we'll talk about other upcoming webinars. And then all we ask is before you leave the room, if you can just in the chat, write your feedback on how the session went. That's all we ask of you. You know, we're doing this for free, but for us to grow and for us to improve, we need your feedback. So towards the end, or if you're leaving early, we said, just put some feedback in the chat for us so we know how we did and how we can do better. Okay, so at this point, we're delving right into it. Let's get right into it. And so civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations are whom we are targeting for this webinar. And so we're talking about community-based organization like the 4-H Club. Like in St. Lucia, we have mothers and fathers. For instance, I know you have 4-H in Trinidad, and you have in Jamaica, and you have in Dominica, right? In St. Lucia, we have some mother and father groups that are community-based. We have the cooperatives that are community-based. We have those industry organized associations, chambers of commerce, coalition of services and unions. Then we have the faith-based. So this is also applicable for the churches and the worship groups. And then we have those professional associations, the medicine, the engineer, the law associations. And then we have these international related organizations are also aiming at building up and development in the different countries. And so we have Lions and Rotary and Kiwanis and the United Nations and so on. Okay, so all these are civil service organization or non-governmental organization, and this is the target group. This is the leaders. We're targeting the leaders, the senior persons in these particular organizations. So we're continuing, and what again, we're starting off, this is a sensitization. We are of the opinion that every single person should know about quality management. The good thing is that a lot of you already know about quality management. You might just not realize you know quality management, because quality management is simply about doing the right thing well. That's what it is. And people have been doing the right thing well for ages. So this is nothing new, but we're trying our best to simplify the concept, to simplify the tool in this presentation. And then we're hoping that in delivering this, we are sensitizing you that, again, on your part, recognizing the value of this tool, that's in your organization, you will commit some resources for improvement, right? Once you have done that, then we expect that you will get greater beneficiary satisfaction, you will improve your effectiveness and efficiency as well as your productivity, and there will be generally institutional strengthening. And what is that impact we're going for? That impact we're going for, which a lot of us are going for, is to enhance innovation, competitiveness, resilience, and sustainability. Okay, so these are the expected outcomes related to this particular webinar. And so let's start off with what is quality management? Well, there is a definition. All we did is, whereas the word customer normally comes here, we've changed it to beneficiary. So it is a systematic approach to achieving the objectives, and whatever your objectives are, be it non-financial or financial, of the organization by focusing on beneficiary satisfaction. Now, here's the value of this. Here is the value of this. Because when you use the word beneficiary now, you're saying this is not just applicable to your work or to your particular CSO or NGO. This is also applicable in our homes. Our children are the beneficiary of our service. Our significant others are the beneficiary of our service. That is the value of this body of knowledge. If you understand this and you apply this, right, then we're talking about happier children, happier significant others, just happier people, because people are more satisfied. This is the value of this body of knowledge. And all of us presenting here today will tell you that we have not come across a body of knowledge as versatile as this body of knowledge known as quality management. But let's move right along. You'll see exactly what we're talking about. So we did some research about organizations that had implemented this, and we came across this CSO in particular, the Cambodia Trust of the UK. And what were they saying were the perceived benefits that they linked to quality management? Quite a few. They said financially, they felt they were a more well-managed organization, and that the trust had been able to reduce the operating costs. Remember what we said? This is about reducing, this is about operational effectiveness and efficiency. So that is going to result in reduced costs. With regard to market, they said the expertise sought by other countries and export services to other countries. So expertise was sought by other countries, and they were able to export their services to other countries in the region. Their image, they're also saying, by being seen to be run as a well-run organization, the trust had secured extra funding. And for a lot of the CSOs and NGOs, you're looking for funding sources. And so there are these people telling you that they attracted extra funding because of implementing this quality management. And then with regard to institutional strengthening, this CSO said this has strengthened the organization on a number of other fronts, such as capacity building exercise, in empowering national staff, by bridging the accountability gap, and both downwards and upwards. So these are benefits associated. I mean, I personally can tell you, quality management, I have brought on all this thing is called business common sense. I am using this in the relationship with my husband, and I'm using this in the relationship with my children. This is the value of this body of knowledge. And again, we have the opinion that everybody should know about this. So we're starting off with the leaders, and we're expecting the leaders will recognize the value of sensitizing their staff on this. Very important. Okay, so we're moving right along. So here is, in a nutshell, what Patrick and myself will be covering with regard to quality management and the COPIS approach. So first of all, let's look at what COPIS represents. COPIS says customer, and our focus is on the beneficiary here. So we put customer/beneficiary, output, processes, input, and sources of inputs. So you can see the COPIS coming into play. Now, when you're using that COPIS model for QM, then let's see how QM comes into place. QM says you need to take all of these things into consideration, but also keep in mind you need to address associated risk, associated issues. You need to do your checks throughout. Your check from the customer to the output, to the process, to the input, to the sources of input. You need to ensure you control. Remember, you're managing processes. And so there must be control, and there must be communication. You know what they say about communication? The lifeblood of any organization. It is the lifeblood of any relationship. And it's all about relationships, people. Okay, and then let's look at the closing of the loop. You must close that loop, right? And remember, sources, a main source of input for you is what is the customer's needs and expectations? What are their requirements? So for your beneficiary, what's the beneficiary needs? And this is what you're trying to meet. You know, there's Carl Albridge that says we have a tendency to prepare a service or a product and then try to sell it to the customer. So we prepare it in our own rooms, and then we try to sell. When what we need to do is prepare product and service based on what the customer wants, based on what the beneficiary wants, and then the sale would be easier. Okay, but we have this backward mindset of creating the thing and then trying to sell it, when what we should do is creating something that people are already telling you they want. So you need to start off with the customer, and you need to start off with the beneficiary. We know that from customer research. This is the first thing you do if you're developing a product. Okay, and now that you know what the customer wants, then you produce the output. And for this output, what processes did you need? And then what inputs and where those sources of inputs coming from? And Patrick in particular will deal with continuous improvement. He'll talk about the importance of feedback, lessons learned, reviewing the performance. But he's going to start off his session from sources of input. So I am going to take you through customer output processes and inputs. Patrick is then going to come in and take you through the rest of it. But keep in mind, we're doing all of this within a context. We have the external environment and we have the internal environment. And one must be aware of this environment, right? Very important that be aware of our context. Very important. And so throughout this presentation, you'll hear us talk about context, talk about integration, talk about alignment, because these are factors that are preventing us from getting the results we want. Okay, Patrick, how are we doing so far? We're okay, Patrick?
Yep, we are going great.
Yeah. Devendra, do we have anything in the chat we want to report on? Are we okay there?
No, nothing yet. We're okay with the chat. Thanks.
Okay, to just let people know, those people who came in late, because Zen went through the housekeeping rules, that if you have a question, just put a Q next to your comment and then put in your question. So Devendra can pick it up very easily. Devendra is on the same page with us as far as all of this. So time is limited. We will not be able to answer a lot of questions at the end. So all through the presentation, if you have a question, just post it in the chat and Devendra is going to answer that question for you. Okay, people? Very important. We understand you're busy people. We understand, we're talking managers, senior persons, you have other things to do. We're not about to waste your time. Okay, so let's make this process as efficient as possible. So let's start off about talking about the beneficiary. And if we're talking the beneficiary, we must talk about an experience. I tell people, when you're talking about an experience, you have to think of the senses. What are they seeing? What are they hearing? What are they feeling? What are they tasting if that comes into play, right? What are they touching? Keep the senses in mind. And the more senses you stimulate, more attractive and enticing the experience is. And so keep in mind, you understand when it's an experience, it's no longer just about your product or service. It's about how is it easily available? Is it accessible? It's about the delivery, right? It's about the location, where you located. They say location, 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 right? How can they access based on your location? It is the benefits or the value for money. It is about the environment that they're receiving this experience in. And it's not just your physical environment. They're also looking at the attitude of your staff. So are your staff, remember the staff too are also customers. So the staff experience is also impacting the beneficiary's experience. So you have to be aware of that psychosocial environment in which your people are working so they can deliver satisfactory to the beneficiary. And let's not forget the beneficiary's journey. Unless we walk their journey, we are not yet focused enough, right? Too many times we put it on paper, but we have not walked it. When you walk the journey of the beneficiary, then you understand exactly what the beneficiary is doing. Okay, so important. So we're mapping out our value chain, but we are not mapping out the beneficiary's journey. And we have to juxtapose these two things against each other. Very important. So we're moving right along. And look at that, Patrick, the first self-assessment question, 1. For your eyes
Already?
only.
Okay, great.
For your eyes only. For
Yes.
your eyes only. Are you generally happy about what you hear from your beneficiaries? Your answer is yes, somewhat or no. Towards the end, Devendra will come in again and tell you how to interpret these scores. But for now, just for your eyes only. You either write down your answer, type it in your phone, but we have 8 self-assessment questions we need you to answer, and the first one is already up. Okay, so again, repeating first self-assessment question 1. Are you generally happy about what you hear from your beneficiaries? Yes, somewhat, no. And we are moving. And your beneficiaries are your members. Your beneficiaries are the communities you're trying to make a difference in. Your beneficiaries, come on, Patrick, who are the beneficiaries? The beneficiaries of your congregation. Patrick, who else we have as beneficiaries?
Yes, especially the underprivileged persons that you may be serving in the community.
There you go.
Yes, of course. And then, of course, the youth. We have to look at the youth.
Without
Because I'm sure a lot
doubt.
of you come from youth clubs.
Yes.
I saw quite a few youth clubs there.
There you go.
These are some of the things.
Yes, keep in mind your benefit. These are the people that you're trying to make the difference with. They have to feel that difference. They have to experience you and experience you positively. And so we just looked at beneficiary. Remember COPIS? So it was customers / beneficiaries, and now the output. So what we need to be, all we have to tell you about your output is your output can be defined or described as your product, your service, or your deliverable. When you use the word deliverable, you start understanding how this is applicable to every single person, because every single person who is working is producing a deliverable, right? So when we're looking at that deliverable, we have to do checks. We have to check it against acceptance criteria, but we also need to check against the beneficiary requirements, because we're aiming for beneficiary satisfaction. And we must start thinking, realizing as much as possible, encourage a circular economy. So these undesired outputs, you have to consider them. You know, if it's a case of garbage, then dispose of the garbage properly, right? If it's a case of paper, then reuse the paper. But keep in mind that you normally, with your processes, you have those undesired outputs, and you have to make sure you handle it properly. It might be a case of reusing and recycling, right? Again, you're going into that circular economy kind of situation. This is the value of quality management. You know, it's touching on almost every area of improvement out there. And so I think we have another self-assessment question. Yes, I'm right. There it is. Self-assessment question 2. Is your product or service generally acceptable to the beneficiaries? For your eyes only, is your answer yes? Is it somewhat, or is it no? For your eyes only.
And you get maximum benefit only if you are telling the truth. So just be very honest, as brutally honest as you can.
Yes, and it's for you. We're not asking you to share it with us.
And it is yours.
Yes.
It is yours. It is yours only, for your eyes only, as Betty says.
And what I think, Patrick, what it says, persons who are currently in this webinar have to be persons who have a growth mindset. And anybody who has a growth mindset is about identifying current strengths and weaknesses, not just pertaining to themselves, but pertaining to the organization. So I think we're safe to go. These people are going to be honest, without a doubt. Because
I mean, to say we all have weaknesses, and I think the sooner we own up to it, is the better position we put ourselves in to solve them.
So true. And Patrick will talk to you about strategies a little later. Okay, and then we go into the meat of it all, the processes. Remember that improvement is about process. You cannot improve people. People improve themselves. When it comes to work, what you can work on is improving your processes. And there are different ways you can improve a process. You can improve a process by using less resources. You can improve a process by making less errors. You can improve a process by making it safer. You can improve a process by making more satisfactory to the employer, to the employee or the staff who is working, or to the worker. You can improve a process by making it more satisfying to the customer or the beneficiaries. These are ways that a process can be improved. But that's what you can improve the process. You know, too many times in organizations, when things go wrong, our first question is, who did it? That should not be your first question. This is blame, and you're causing people to become defensive. Your first question, what went wrong? What went wrong with the process? How we can make the process better? That's what you can work on. You cannot change people. People change themselves. So let's work on changing the process or refining the process so we can deliver what we want. And when we talk in processes, let's first start out with your value chain. The value chain is those activities that allow you to deliver the product or service. But while you're doing that, you also have those supporting activities. So budgeting, HR, maintenance, IT, these are your supporting services. Be aware, because all of that impacts your processes. Patrick will talk in detail about PDCA. Anytime you're managing a process or a system, you must apply PDCA. If you're not doing that, you're not ready yet. Your competence of your people to be able to manage those processes. And remember, people, competence is a combination of things. Your education, your training, your skill, your experience. And Patrick, the big A. Patrick, you know that big A for competence? Your attitude.
Attitude, yes.
Your attitude.
What people says is that you cannot train attitude. You can train people, but the attitude, you must come with that attitude.
Yeah.
And without that attitude, you may be untrainable.
But attitude, no, but that part, this is about emotional intelligence. We're going into emotional intelligence there now. And the beautiful thing about emotional intelligence, unlike IQ, you know, which is the intelligence quotient, emotional intelligence can be enhanced. You can get better people. We can alter, but it's you. It's you making that decision to change your attitude. But be aware, your competence, you might be very qualified, but your attitude might be what's preventing you from getting the results you want, at which point you're being incompetent. Keep that in mind. And processes interact with each other. And because we're working in a system, we must understand that these interactions are very important because we need those processes to work in synergy. That's what we want, right? We want it to be recognized as integrational processes, so everybody's working towards those same goals and those same objectives through those processes. Remember, one process can impact your process. And so, I mean, we can go in a whole session understanding about process interaction, but time does not permit that. And remember, we know you're busy people and we only have 90 minutes with you. Documented information. You know, I say to my trainees, people who care, document. You know, I need to put on a cup, you know, Patrick. People who care, document, period.
Yeah, you should patent that.
I patent, yes, I'm patent, yeah, we have patent that. People who care, document. Documentation ensures continuity, consistency, right? Compliance, conformance, communication. And when I thought I'd said all the C's, somebody tell me, documentation ensures you CYA, you cover your, remember that too. That's what documentation does, right? And with processes, again, if you're controlling processes, that means you must monitor and check. And so there must be metrics and measurements. You know, in my classes, I find one of the things that people have difficulty is coming up with measurable objectives, right? Your processes have to be measured. And so your metrics and measurements coming into place. And then we're talking about effectiveness and efficiency. When you talk about streamlining your process, refining your process, that's what you're aiming for. You're aiming to improve effectiveness and you're aiming to improve efficiency. We okay with that, Patrick? Anything else you want to mention with this? I'm okay.
No,
can I move on?
You have it well nailed.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Patrick will be reinforcing it as we go along. Patrick will be reinforcing it as we go along. And there we have self-assessment question 3. Remember, you have 8 of them. So far, you have done 2. Here is the 3rd one. Are your processes generally improving across the organization? Answer yes, somewhat or no. And remember, your processes.
This will also give you the opportunity, Betty, this will also give them the opportunity to identify what their processes are.
Yes, yes, that's right. Especially your processes that are part of your core and part of your support, because all of that contributes to the effectiveness and the efficiency of the organization. So self-assessment question 3, that is question 3 out of 8 questions. And Devendra at the end will tell you how to interpret those answers. So for your eyes only, are your processes generally improving across the organization? Yes, somewhat or no. And we're moving right along. So now remember, let's go back to COPIS. So we dealt with the customer and we looked at the beneficiary in particular. We looked at the beneficiary's experience. Then we went on to discuss outputs. Then we just discussed processes. So now we're discussing inputs. And Patrick will come on in a while and discuss sources of inputs with you. So I'm handling inputs. And so, you know, I say to people, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And planning involves identifying not just the resources you need, but the information you need. And you know, Patrick, that's where we're going wrong, you know. We tend to think of just tangible things when we're planning, but there is a lot of information associated with planning. And so again, you have to start off, what do the beneficiaries need? You know?
Customer needs, yeah.
What are their needs? What are their expectations? And you know, the thing is, expectations are just as important because you're aiming to satisfy. If you don't live up to the expectations, people are dissatisfied. So you must know both. What are the needs and what are the expectations? Understand the context. What works in community A might not work in community B. What worked for the congregation from the church A might not work for the congregation from the other church. We must be aware of your context. Context externally and context internally. That's the caveat. That's the caveat to quality management. Yes, I will aim to meet your needs and expectations, but within the confines of the law. So if there is a law pertaining to whatever you're offering, you need to ensure that you know the law. Because you know what they say, Patrick? Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
There's no excuse.
That's right. And no need to start from scratch. If there are standards, protocols, codes of practice out there, specifications out there, reference it. Reference it. Very important. No need to start from scratch, right? Reference standards out, and you will understand why the Bureau of Standards was very keen on partnering with us, because they realized we were promoting the whole idea of the use of standards. And then if you're a CSO, if you're an NGO, and you interested in any funding agency, you must know about the SDGs, period. You become more attractive once you make mention of an SDG. And the thing about SDGs, I find we are not taking ownership enough, because when we look at the pillars, Patrick, the pillars of the Sustainable Development Goals are the 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace. Look, we have Trinidad right now. You'll have a big symposium going on, CARICOM has a symposium going on with regard to the crime situation in the region. Peace and partnership. Again, what's going on there? This is malls collaborating with QPC, collaborating with NCPC, collaborating with the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards. Together, we will get further. Alone, you might move fast, but together, we will get further. Partnerships are very important. And have your policy. This is your intent. This is your intention. This is you setting a tone with a policy. And so have a policy that is beneficiary-centric. Very important. And then remember what this was about? This is about achieving objectives, whatever they are. So you must have those key performance indicators related to your objectives. Establish those objectives. Make sure somebody is responsible. That means they're accountable for reporting on the objectives. You know, Patrick, Drucker was the one who came up with this term, SMART objectives. And people tend to say the A, so we normally say the A is achievable or attainable. However, if you go back to Drucker actually had the A to imply assignable.
Oh, okay.
Who is responsible? And so now I say objectives are smarter. I put A for achievable, A for assignable, I put E for evaluate, and I put R. You need to revise those objectives. Very important there. And then we have processes, PDC again, Patrick will talk more to PDCA, but whatever area of work you are involved in, whatever area of work you're involved in, and this is applicable to workplace as well as home. If you are managing, then you must be involved in PDCA. Not so, Patrick? You're not ready yet?
Well, without the PDCA, I mean, you can't even cook a proper meal.
Exactly.
If you don't plan your meal, if you don't do it, you don't light the fire, you don't check, you check for salt.
You don't taste, exactly. If you taste, exactly.
Taste, well, then you can't even cook. So
yeah, and if you're cooking for somebody, then you need to get feedback from the person as to
that is the
how well you did.
You can improve it.
You can improve
but
it.
The next time you won't put too much salt.
Exactly.
Yes.
You know, there's a big thing on change management, Patrick, but I agree with persons who tell you every manager is a change manager. Because if you're managing, you must act to improve. And acting to improve is about change. As simple as that. Any activity, any process, any system you're involved in, if you're not doing PDCA, then you are not managing, period. And then we have to talk about risk and strategies. You know, Covey says the first habit of highly effective people is be proactive. If you're trying to do anything well, one of the first things you have to do is determine what can go wrong, also what can go right, and come up with strategies. And we started off with the beneficiary needs and expectations, and we must end with the beneficiary feedback. How well did you do? If you're not asking for feedback, you are not yet on a growth journey. I like to say, when it comes to any system, the beneficiary or the customer is the alpha and the omega. Start off with what they want, and then at the end, you need to ask, how well did you deliver? And this is it. And this is just information, you know, Patrick, we haven't get into resources yet. Now let's get into resources. I tell you, if you plan well, you can't go wrong, you know. And so your resources, your human resource, remember these are special resources, your human resource. You cannot treat your people like you're treating your equipment. Each one is an individual. And you know, it is William James who said, the greatest need in the human being is to feel appreciated. Yeah? Each person feels appreciated in a different way. You need to understand the individual you're dealing with. Your resources, your infrastructure, your equipment, your materials, your technology, your environment. Don't forget your methods and your monitoring devices, right? Very important. Remember, you must do that check. You're doing, guided by the method, but you're also checking along the way. And my personal favorite, Patrick, organizational knowledge. Know the background or the history. Know the connections. Utilize the lessons learned. Utilize the problem solutions. You have that information in your organization. Make sure, you know, Patrick, I don't understand how organizations allow people to leave and not do exit interviews. I don't understand that. To me, that's a standard. The same way you bring them in, when they're leaving, you want to talk to them.
No, half of the time, Betty, half of the time they sneak out because you have been managing so bad. They just leave.
There you go. There you go. Imagine that. That's what's going on. All those toxic environments that we need to get out of that. That's not helping us. Very important. And then you should have another self-assessment question coming in. And there it is. Self-assessment question number 4. In the work of your organization, is the work of your organization guided by standards, protocols, codes of practice, be it industry, national, regional, or international? Is that a yes? Is that a somewhat? Or is that a no? Again, Devendra, for people who just came in, do you mind just mentioning those 3 self-assessment questions that came in before?
Okay, I'll put them in the chat. Thanks.
Beautiful, thank you. So for those of you who came in late, this is the 4th self-assessment question out of 8 self-assessment questions. This allows you to recognize your own current gaps in your system. Okay, so this is the 4th one. Patrick will take you through the rest of them. Okay, is the work of your organization guided by standards, protocol, codes of practice? And we're talking industry related, national related, regional related, or international. By the way, we must point out to you that these presentations are based on the international standard for quality management. And that is the ISO 9001 that we will be giving as a gift at the end of this session, right? Okay, that's it. That's it. I think Patrick, I'm done on my side. It's now all yours. Take over, please.
Okay, thank you so very much, Betty.
You're
Good
welcome.
morning again to one and all of you lovely people, Caribbean people, the United States, my fellow Trinidadians. Betty would have been telling you a lot about the COPIS model, and she did the COPI, and now which the input, and now I am going to the sources of inputs, which is the S. Now, traditionally, the ISO 9000 would have been SIPOC, SIPOC, which starts with the sources of input. But Betty in her wisdom has reversed the thing and said COPIS because we want to put the customer first. It's something that I know I initially frowned upon a little bit until she really made a point. But we spoke a lot about relationships too. And I just want to say that I heard in several quarters, and you people who belong to the civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, NGOs, and so on, that relationships are more valuable than money and last a lot longer. And I'll tell you a little story before we be going to the slide. I belong to a church group. We invited an orthopedic surgeon to do a lecture, free lecture. My wife and some of the members of the men's group, we did the snacks and so on. And the gentleman came on a Thursday night, 7 o'clock, which is normal dinner time, I guess. He did the lecture. And, you know, it was for free and, you know, probably close to 100 persons. And you wouldn't believe, the very next morning, he called me. I said, maybe I didn't tell him thanks. He called me to thank me. Why did he call me to thank me? Because his secretary told him that he's booked for the next 2 weeks because he did that one freebie. Now, his visit starts at $500 TT. And his Trinidad office, he has a Tobago office and a Trinidad office. His Trinidad office was booked out for the next 2 weeks. So what we're saying is
the value of giving back. The value of giving back. Yes.
So I'm urging you to stick with it, stick with your role, the very important role that you play in providing relief, comfort, and all the other forms of support that you have been providing to your numerous beneficiaries, especially the youth. And here we are talking about the 4-H clubs, the youth camps, the mothers and fathers groups, all these clubs, the Cub Scouts, and you know, the work that you do for the less privileged and otherwise marginalized members of the society is so essential that getting over to the slide, we look at our sources of input for the beneficiaries. We have to ensure that these sources are not only just credible, but they need to be reliable, right? So your selection process must be formal. And we're talking here documentation. If you really care, according to Betty, must be formal, must be suitably structured by way of, let's say, thorough data-driven and consistent data, not to mention being documented for traceability. All right? So you have to look at your suppliers, you must select them, you must review their performance, you must manage that relationship. Remember what he said? The relationships are far more valuable than money. And of course, in that evaluation, you must ensure that they meet the criteria, which is, of course, to meet the specifications. They must be affordable. So we are looking at some of the criteria must include proper and fair pricing. Because remember, you'll be looking for donors, you'll be looking for sponsors. You need timely delivery, you must have confidence in the services that you provide. And of course, it must be ready for use. And that also includes ease of use. Because we know in the Caribbean, sometimes our systems become so bogged down with red tape and protocols. We must ensure that we have this ease of use so that people could access your services, especially if you are in the Lions Club or the Rotary Club, I think is another one, right? Or the men's groups, the St. Vincent de Paul Society. These are people that all would ensure that the marginalized persons, those persons who would need our relief or comfort and our support, would ensure that these projects are properly funded. And as we saw with the Cambodia project, people are actually approaching them to find out, you know, what could we do to become one of your beneficiaries. So we will move on to our 5th assessment question. So do you evaluate your key suppliers and contributors? And my very simple example of your suppliers and contributions, going back to the home, when you walk into the market and you pick up a lovely zabuka, you start squeezing it. Not so at the vendor say, look, put that down. Don't squeeze my zabukas, don't squeeze my Julie mangoes. This is the evaluation of your key supplier. In this case, you're not squeezing anything. You are just ensuring that these people are credible. They're not involved in any money laundering. There's probably not a gambling club or anything of the sort. They're not involved in drugs. You need to evaluate your key suppliers and what we are looking for. We are looking for consistency. We are looking for credibility. We are looking for reliability. I'm certain that I'm preaching to the choir. Now, if for any reason what I'm saying sounds a little bit outlandish, put it in the chat. It means that I'm not explaining it properly. Or I am just speaking plain nonsense. So we are looking at addressing our risk now. In all situations, you have your risk. And clause 4 of the ISO 9000 talks about the context of the organization that Betty was alluding to earlier. And with the context, we look at things like the culture, your laws, internal and external exigencies, your protocols, your principles, right? Which mandates all the users to consider your issues. You must look at the issues, whether you're an NGO or a private organization. And most of you, I know, are not for profit. You have to look at the issues and you have to look at the risk that they present. So I just selected two simple ones. We look at, that's a budget allocation, which introduced a certain risk. So the budget allocation would introduce the inefficient use of funds. And we know that this is something that is rampant. And we always tend to frown on people who take our funds and you see them the very next day driving a lovely big car, having dinners at the most expensive restaurants when their beneficiaries are starving. So in the private sector, how do they really deal with this? What they do is that they lower their overheads or they retrench people. But you don't have that. You don't have that commodity. So what you have to do, especially in your civil society groups and your NGOs, right? Your strategy, proper allocation and use of funds will be the strategy. But what are some of the things that you need to do is to give of your best, give from your heart. And this is what would help us if we should look at that first issue. Now, if we look also at the second issue, which is volunteers' contribution and your performance, sometimes we see that we have a lack of direction because we don't have the leadership and the team building skills. And we should, and in this case, we should take a page out of the book of the sports people. You would never see a team, be it the West Indies cricket team, be it football, be it basketball, not having a captain, a coach, a sponsor, manager, and of course, we always get the support of the community. We have to have that direction. That is one of the risks that we normally face when we get into, especially into charitable organizations. If we decide that, okay, we are all bosses, we have no leader here, we have an equal say. Yes, it sounds very nice, but at some point in time, somebody must have the deciding vote. That is more or less led by some informed decision and information. So the strategy really for this is that we need to have proper leadership. And if you have proper leadership, obviously you're going to have a lovely and a well-informed team. So one of the things, so we can now move to the sequence of actions that would close the loop on the COPIS model. And that sequence of action is, we're going to check, we're going to correct, and we're going to control. So what are the checks we have to make? So at first, remember we spoke about the processes a little earlier. Betty spoke about the processes. She spoke at length on the processes. And one of the things that we need to do is that you need to check. You need to know what are the control points or the hold points in your process. Where does the rubber hit the road? So the beneficiaries' needs and expectation obviously is one of the things you have to look at. Right? You have to look at your outputs, what you do, your processes where you do some audits. And in those processes, you need to also check not just what is needed, but how far you have reached, where you are as far as all your efforts are concerned. You look at your inputs, your sources of inputs, all these are the checks. And of course, you need to find out whether or not your beneficiary is satisfied. You have to also know, and that satisfaction really would speak to the objectives that you set and how well you perform, how well you meet those objectives. If your objective is complete satisfaction, then of course you have to ensure that you know what the word satisfaction means. Does it mean that each of the beneficiaries, let's say you're feeding people, poor people off the side of the street, does it mean that they'd have to have a side of pork or a T-bone steak? Or is it a simple meal with a drink that would satisfy them? Now, once you have checked your objectives, you looked at your beneficiary satisfaction, Then you'd want to correct. You look at your issues, right? You're going to address the issues and you need to analyze your data. And it must be fact-based data analysis by suitably qualified individuals. And when I say suitably qualified, I'm not talking about the PhDs and the MSc people. I'm talking about those directly involved in the operations. Those who are accustomed to feeding the poor, treating unprivileged children, right? Taking action, taking suitable action to ensure that, that their stakeholders, not just the funding people, but the beneficiaries, are in good order or are well taken care of. Now, from once we did the correction, then we need to control. And in control, what do we have? We have problem solving. And what we're going to use the lessons learned from experience and recorded outcomes. And the thing is, we can learn lessons from bad experiences as well as the good experiences. So regardless of what, you will always be on top of things once you have actually put yourself in this situation. To have those lessons learned, you will record your outcomes. If you really care, according to Betty, you will keep records, you will document. And you'll do all this in a bid to continually improve your product, your services, and not just the needs, but also the wants of the beneficiaries, if it is possible, if funding would allow. Okay, so we're gonna look at—
Patrick, just a point to be,
yes.
just you talking about the importance of the value to making a mistake. And it was Einstein who said, the
Yes.
only mistake made in life is the lesson not learned.
See, lessons not done, of course, of course.
That's right.
And,
That's
and
right.
what I also like, what I also recognize too, is that in an argument, the person who loses the argument normally is the person who wins. Because if I am arguing with you and I win the argument, it means that I knew it all along and you didn't know. If it is the other way around, then I would have learned something.
Yes, the growth
Yeah,
mindset.
because you knew it all along and I
The
wasted
growth
probably 2 or 3 hours of your time for you to explain to me why I am wrong, right? You didn't learn anything at all because you knew it all along, and it took you, I wasted your 3 hours to become enlightened. To say, well, okay, yes, Betty, you are correct. So we would look, there's a nice little video here for you to look at. Do you have it lined up, Betty? Nice. All right. I'm just giving you a little chance to finish laughing. The car that was just pushed over the side actually is a Porsche. I'm not into cars too much, but somebody informed me that it's a Porsche. It's not a Mercedes, it's not a BMW. It's a little more expensive than that. You see, because in some cases and situations, well, we are focused on what we can do and not what the beneficiary wants. So as concerned NGOs, I know you are eager to show our beneficiaries or well, your clients what you can do. We normally want to show them what we can do. So this video now more or less illustrates the shortcomings of the CPOC model, which is S, supplier, right, or source of inputs. You have the I, the inputs, the P, process, O, output, and the C is the customer. So you see where the customer is. The customer is on the end. And this is on page 2 or 3 of the ISO, your standard. The S, in this video, the S came first, the supplier, the source of inputs. Okay? He had no idea what the customer wanted. He had no idea that the guy was stretching after he ran. He thought because he did not communicate with the customer, he went and he delivered his service. He gave 2 hoots of his horn, which seems to say, well, goodbye and have a nice day. So he didn't even offer the guy a lift back to civilization, left him in the middle of nowhere. So an example that I could think about is that we have, we are multi-religious people in the Caribbean. And so you can imagine you are going to feed some underprivileged children. And you got yourself a lovely side of pork sausages, you had your beef pies, and all the rest of it, chocolates and all that. And when you went there, most of the children were Muslims, so they don't touch pork. A lot of the children maybe were Hindus, though they don't eat beef, right? So there are your pork sausages and your beef pies to throw away already. And then the rest of them, because you carry chocolates and Easter eggs, some of them were diabetic. You couldn't give them the chocolates. So you need to know your customer. Even if you're a faith-based organization, even if you are providing these things for free, you can end up doing more damage than good. So Betty, with that said, would you just play the video over again one more time so they can see the sequence of events, starting with but this is the customer. And the supplier is on his way, source of input, right? And he's going to give his input in a short while and you'll see the process. All right, so by just a visual, there are some children sitting there, okay. And this is the input and this is the process. Right, so that's the process there. And what is the output? The output is that Porsche is over the side. This gentleman is driving away. And here is the customer at the end of the process. It has to be the other way around.
You notice he didn't ask for feedback from the customer.
Well, of course, that was the two hoots of the horn was the feedback. Have a nice day.
Well, that's the supplier. No, but he didn't ask.
Yes, he didn't ask for feedback. He didn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, he didn't find out. Yes,
and so he's none the wiser. He's none the wiser. As far as he's concerned, he did something good, and meanwhile you have a dissatisfied customer.
He did a lovely job. He gave the guys food, saying, "Well, you didn't say thank you, but it's quite okay."
Yes.
Toot, toot, and there he goes. So we are now going to move to our sixth self-assessment question. Oh, do we have a question in between? Yes, that's it. The sixth self-assessment question. Betty, I think you're muted. So, do you apply any problem-solving techniques to prevent reoccurrence of the issues? And this is where we ask for feedback. Do you seek any feedback so that you can apply some sort of problem-solving technique? And when I talk about problem-solving techniques, there are several other things you can use. You can use, the simplest would be brainstorming, and then you could get fancy by doing fishbone diagrams and all that. But Devendra is a big one on this, and he was saying that if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So
the more tools, the better.
So the more tools you have, the better. So do you apply problem-solving techniques to prevent reoccurrence of your issues? Okay, I'll give you a couple seconds again. Yes, somewhat or no. And remember, you're not sharing this with anybody. You are keeping this to yourself for your own self-evaluation. Okay, Betty, maybe we can move ahead a bit. So we are into communication. You know, they say location, location, location. Well, in this case, it's communication, communication, communication. So from the previous video, I'm sure there's no doubt in your mind that communication is key, especially when dealing with the public, the persons who need your help, your beneficiaries, and there are several bits of information that I'm sure that you would need. And as an NGO, when you're dealing with NGOs, you need to know a few things. How do we connect with them, your beneficiaries? How do you connect with your beneficiaries? What are the public relations? What are the loopholes that we have to jump through? How much red tape would there be? So what about your staff and volunteers? The people who work with you? The progress report, status of the safe service. Maybe what's in it for them, but the thing is, they know what's in it for them. They want that satisfaction. Most people that do work for free look for that sort of satisfaction. They are much more satisfied. Remember what he said, relationships are much more valuable. The relationships that we build with these people, right? How impactful, how can I be impactful and appreciated? These are some of the things we look at. We look at the awareness, how aware they are. We are not looking for things on a need to know basis. We need to be a part of the team. And other external parties, what is? You have suppliers, you have contributors, you have the funding agencies, you have the regulatory agencies. They all need to be communicated with. So these regulators and suppliers are very critical since they play a pivotal role in drafting of all our policies and establishing of your common procurement practices, especially where their funds would be, as we say in Trinidad, jumping up or being used in any way or the other. So with this, we would move to...
Yeah. Patrick, just a point to be made here, be made here, as when it comes to the stakeholders, everybody has to win.
Yes.
Everybody has to feel value. Yeah. If one person is not feeling value, they're going to pull out of the relationship and the relationship is going to be affected. Everybody has to feel value.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that's Stephen Covey think win-win. So we move to our 7th self-assessment question. Do you have a written statement document? Have you documented, right, anything that captures your intent as it relates to the service of the beneficiaries? So if you go back to think of one of Betty's slides where you talk about the objectives. Did you set KPIs? So you need to have some written statement that captures your intent. It could be a charter. Our main aim, our charter is to ensure that all the people we serve are comfortable, are satisfied, and are self-sustainable at the end of our intervention. Something to that effect. You want to ensure that you put something in that involves continual improvement. So for your eyes only, again, would you please be very truthful about this one? Do you have a written statement? Do you have a charter? Do you have objectives, KPIs, anything that says what you intend to do when you deliver the service to your stakeholders?
And what I find it does, Patrick, is it sets the correct tone for anybody coming into your organization, as well as for the beneficiaries.
As well as for the beneficiaries.
That's right, that you're committed to delivering to them and how you're going to be doing that. Very important.
If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Okay, so we will move on now we look at the PDCA cycle. All right, so as I said, this plan, do, check, act cycle is known as the continuous improvement cycle, and it forms the basis, or it provides the format for maybe all of the national and international management standards that I have come across so far, right? And it is the method by which all work is structured. There is no way you could successfully carry out any task unless you would have gone through all 4 of these steps. No, most of us go through 3.
Yes.
Because sometimes you don't ask for feedback, like the gentleman who just pushed the guy Porsche over the cliff. Sometimes you only do plan, do, and you might do some checks. And whether if you are satisfied or not satisfied, well, it ends there. We did anyway. Once you complete, so some people do plan and do only. It's like cooking without tasting the food.
Yes.
You plan, you cook it, you cover the pot down, and you go on your way. You don't know.
Patrick, you break.
Have enough salt, right? You don't know whether it needs some sort of additional ingredient. So when we talk about Betty, I think you just broke up there.
You broke up a bit there, but I'm hearing you clearly now.
Okay, yes, I'm now hearing you clearly. Okay. I'm seeing a sign that says my internet is a little bit unstable, but I guess I will clear up. Okay, you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm hearing you, Patrick.
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you. Okay, Patrick. Okay, Patrick is at
it's the plan, do, check, act. Yes, okay. So the plan, do, check, act. The plan phase, you have to determine the beneficiary's requirements so that you can plan to deliver what you have to deliver. Okay, so once you have your plans put down, then you must implement the plan. So the implementation phase, or the do phase, is where we'd be able to implement the plan and ensure that everybody, that we actually do what we set out to do, whether it's feeding the poor, whether it's mentoring or tutoring youths, or seeing about our congregation. That is where the implementation comes in, right? The do phase. So in the do phase, that starts with the actual implementation. It could be a pilot project, or it could be full scale. just feedback. Are you hearing me?
Yes,
Hello?
I am.
Okay,
Yes, I am.
all right. Okay, so we go into the check phase. I know I had some internet problems a short while ago. So the check phase is where we collect and we analyze data. In this phase, what we do is that we do some sorts of measurements, such as audits, we do data collection, we do analysis. And the thing is, we can't be fazed by whatever we find out when we do our checks. Because as I said, we learn from successful projects. We also learn from failures. We learn what not to do. So don't be afraid to do your checks. We send out surveys, and our rule of thumb is that you get back 10%. So if you send out 100 surveys and you get back 10, we say, well, okay, that is par for the course. But you need to do your surveys. At least there would be a message in the 10 pieces of feedback that you would have received. But it doesn't make sense. The whole exercise would not be, would make little sense at all if we do not act on what we would have found. Would not be effective or efficient. So you need to improve our services. We need to know exactly how we did. If you're a vendor and you're selling whatever snow cone or peanuts, whatever you sell at the side of the road, if you have no idea of how much you sold yesterday, you cannot say whether you improved today. So you went out with 100 packs of nuts, you didn't know whether you had 100 or you had enough for 100 glasses of lemonade. You drank out half or most of it, or you gave it away. You have no idea. You have no idea because you have no data. You cannot improve what you cannot measure. If you can't measure it, you cannot improve it because you wouldn't know whether you did better or worse. So you have to collect and analyze your data so that you can improve your products and services, and you need to implement your lessons learned. So I would not go and do an audit or check anything out if for some reason I cannot do some sort of improvement on it. Okay, and of course with the lessons learned, once you have the lessons learned, then you can close the loop. Okay, so with that, I would pass you all on to Devendra.
Just before you leave, Patrick, I think we need to let people know that there are variants to PDCA. So you have OPDCA, where you observe and then you plan, or you have PDSA, where instead of a check, you have study.
PDSA is a big one, yes.
Plan, that's right. Study, act. And the whole thing that these things are not discrete. That while you planning, you can be doing, while you're doing, you checking, while you're checking, you're acting. But it's just all of them have to be done if you're managing.
Because while you are cooking, you'll be tasting. So you're doing and you're checking at the same time.
That's right.
That's the best example because I love my belly.
Yes.
As a Caribbean person, I love to eat. So while you are cooking, you'll be checking. And once that is done, then you improve it. You put a little more salt. And if I learned something the other day, if it's too salty, you can throw some sugar in.
Yes, or put a potato.
Or put in a potato, something with starch. All right, and then you close the loop. So we go to self-assessment. Question 8. Do you conduct reviews of your organization's performance at least annually? So you need to check. So you do your checks, and then of course, on your review, you're going to take your action plans. So it's not Devendra yet, it's self-assessment. Question 8. So be very honest, do you conduct reviews of your organization? At least every year, have some review as to how you would have done, whether you did better than last year, whether you did worse, and what could you do to improve. Okay, so with that, once you have the answer down, we move to Devendra. Devendra will now explain to you how to interpret your self-assessment scores. Okay, Dev, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. Good. So we would have completed all 8 self-assessment questions. You would have had the 3 options that we're seeing in the column on the left there. Yes, somewhat, and no. Now what you're going to do, go back to your notes. For question 1, if you had put somewhat, give yourself a score of 3. And do that for all 8 of the questions. When you're finished assigning the scores to the answers you chose, then run a total. All right, so I'll give you guys a couple seconds to do that, maybe 10 seconds.
Again, we
And
stress, we're not asking you to share it with us. This is for your eyes only. You're
yes,
doing your self-assessment.
yeah. So take a couple seconds, do your assign your scores, do the total, and now with the interpretation, if your total score is between 32 and 40, then you think that your organization is doing well. If the total score is between 17 to 31, then you think your organization is doing well in some areas, but it needs to improve in other areas. If the score is 16 or lower, it's likely that you need some expert support to improve the organization. And just as a reminder, Betty said, what's it, Betty? Documenting is caring?
No, if you care, you document.
If you care, you document.
If you care, you document.
Good. So when you look back at the scores you've assigned, whether the questions, whether the answers were yes, somewhat, or no, if you have not documented, then some of the yes answers may need to change to somewhat. But we leave that for after this webinar is complete. All right, so we move on to the next slide, please, Betty. And the question is, when do we start? So Betty, let's start. And by the time you are 3 seconds into a 200-meter race, it's not worth it to go ahead. The question about when to start, you are in competition. Even if you are non-governmental organizations involved in charity works, non-profit, you are in competition with similar bodies for funding. You are in competition with similar bodies for volunteers. Some of the work that I do internationally requires the commitment of volunteers, and we have challenges sometimes for some working groups to get enough people onto a particular working group because the people are busy volunteering their time with other organizations or even other committees within the same organization. So how soon do you need to start implementing quality management and following the COPIS model? Well, the answer is, based on the video, you can't wait for the others to start running ahead of you. All right, so I hand back over to Betty at this point, and she'll talk about the next steps. Betty?
Thank you so much, Devendra. And I don't know if you're aware of that, but what we have noticed is now a lot of funding agencies are making a quality management system a requirement. Have you come across that? Where they're actually, that definitely you'll be given for the concern if you have such a system in place. Devendra, can you attest to that? That's happening?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you with some hot off the press news. I've been selected by a firm in Spain to be part of a project, an 18-month project, and I got the draft contract this morning, and clause number 12 in the contract is quality management.
There you go.
For the project, and it's a funded project. It's funded actually by the Caribbean Development Bank. So
yes,
it's a requirement that is not only applied to the firm that has the contract, but also to me as a key expert.
Yes. And again, quality management has to be recognized as a it's integrative, it's all encompassing. So it doesn't matter, it's cross-cutting, Devendra, that it doesn't matter what your area of work is, quality management is essential, because quality management is simply about doing the right thing well. So whatever your work area is, quality management is applicable. And so if you can state that you know about quality management, you're already giving yourself an edge. Very important. Thank you so much, Dev, for sharing that.
So Betty, just going a little further on that point.
Yes.
for the more developed countries,
Mhm.
and I'll share a bit, when I was searching for universities in Japan to go and do my master's there, I was looking for a master's in quality and I couldn't find any.
Mhm.
And when I got to Japan and started doing my MBA, I understood why. The Japanese build quality into every course. When we
Everything.
were doing finance, quality
That's
was a
right.
part of it.
That's
Marketing,
right.
quality was a part of it. So it's
Yes,
integrated into all of
that's
the other
right.
disciplines, even at the teaching level, at the master's
Yes,
level.
yes. And once you understand what it is, you can understand why it would be integrated. And this is about doing the right thing well. That is just integrated no matter what area of work you're into. Thank you so much for sharing that, Devendra. And so let us move on. So next steps. Next steps. So green means we're ready to go. We have sensitized you. We have sensitized you, the leaders, the senior persons of the CSOs and the NGOs and the other organizations. We have sensitized you on what this is. This is nothing new. Some of you will realize you already know this, but this provides for you a benchmark. It is something you can assess your organization against, how you're doing. Okay, you cannot say you don't know anymore. You know about it. Your next step now, what is the next step? You have options. You can do a needs assessment. And a needs assessment is having us come in or have somebody come in to just understand where you're at, and what do you need to get to where you want to go. That's a needs assessment. You might decide, listen, this body of knowledge, and you should, this body of knowledge is so important. Every staff member should know about it. And so you have your staff awareness and you buy in. You have to get your staff. Remember, you're not going to make any change in your organization if your staff is not on board, right? And so you need to sensitize them. And we do a beautiful sensitization of staff, something to keep in mind. We keep it simple, we keep it relevant, and we talking QM, not just in your workplace, but we talking QM in your homes. Because Patrick kept saying over and over, people, this is about relationship management. I am using QM in the relationship with my husband. I'm using the relationship with my children. This is the value of this body of knowledge. Because people who stay in a relationship with you, think about it. People who stay in a relationship with you are people whose needs and expectations continue to be met, period. The people who are no longer in a relationship with you, it is because their needs and expectations will not be met, period. Patrick and I say, when we're old and we no longer have the job, right. It is, and we're sick and we need a bowl of soup. It's those right. relationships that will save us, not the house, not the house.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Exactly. Keep that in mind. This is the value of this body of knowledge. And we go on again. Maybe you decide, listen, at this point you know about this, you are already implementing some measures, and so you just want to assess yourself against a particular standard. Then you have that option. But start that journey of improvement. And once you've decided where you're at and what you need to do, then let's close the gaps. Let's start closing the gaps. And just doing this self-assessment, you should have identified some gaps that need closing. And we're saying QM can guide you in closing those gaps. Okay, so this is just a sample improvement approach for related to next steps. And so we come to the competition, and we must get through. Devendra, we just have about 20 minutes, 10 minutes for that competition, 10 minutes, not a lot of time, or even less than that. We have less than 10 minutes for the competition. We're giving away things. We're giving away things. The Bureau is giving away things. We are giving away things. And you are involved. So let's begin. Competition guidelines. A fill-in-the-blank item will appear on the screen. A facilitator will type the item number in the chat. So Devendra, once it appears on the screen, Devendra will then type the answer in the chat. Right? The item number. So your responses must come after the item number, not before the item number. It must come after the item number. The item number must appear in the chat before submitting your answer. Very important. You must see the item number in the chat. Devendra is going to type the item number in and you respond below that. Type the correctly spelled word or phrase, in the chat. Ensure it is communicated to everyone and not privately. Very important there. You might have sent it, but did we receive it? And 5, the first eligible person to type the correctly spelled answer wins the gift for their organization, with the exception of item 4, where you win a gift just for you. Okay, so let us begin. We have 44 people in the house and the competition is about to start. Okay, so item 1 should be typed in the chat at this point. And item, yes, very good. And it says for the ISO standard 15, and it's for the standard pertaining to quality management, and it is a standard for your organization. Quality management improves your organization's E and E. Make sure it's spelled correctly. This is about a skill, not just about knowledge. Can you type quickly and correctly?
We have a couple correct answers
Yes,
already.
we have correct answer.
We have a couple.
Yep.
So Dev, who is the first correct answer came from?
First correct answer we have from Desmond Henry, effectiveness and efficiency.
Beautiful. And Desmond Henry is coming from where? Desmond, where are you coming from? Are you coming from Antigua, Antigua, Grenada, Barbados, Desmond? Where are you coming from?
NIC. Desmond
NIC St. Lucia.
I'm not sure.
NIC.
St. Lucia.
Once it says NIC St. Lucia, well
St. Lucia,
done,
right?
Desmond.
NIC
Well done. St. Lucia has gotten that first prize.
And we have a lot of people that gave the correct answer. So Betty, at least they've been paying attention.
Very good. Congratulations. I tell you, our people, Devendra, everybody in this session has a growth mindset, without a doubt. They're on a journey of
similar to
improvement.
NIB, National Insurance Board. Okay.
There you go.
So
here's item number 2. David's typed in the chat. Item number 2 is for and this one is for collaboration, the sensitization of persons within the CSOs. So that same presentation we have done, we want to do a similar one for your staff, but you need to win that prize, right? In the COPIS model, O stands for dash and P stands for dash.
All right, Joni will give us half the answer. So not Joni, going so quickly. All right, we have, hang on, let me just double check. Yep, we have a winner, and I'm not sure about the pronunciation.
Nigina?
Nigina, I think, yes.
Nigina,
yes.
Could you come on, talk to us? Well, not tell us, are we pronouncing that properly, Nigina? And where are you coming from? Nigina, where are you coming from? Nigina is not ready to tell us where she's coming from. Okay, but take note of the name.
Right.
Okay. So
St. Lucia. She's from St. Lucia.
Only St. Lucia. My St. Lucians. Very good.
Take win.
You know, Patrick, we have 2 Nobel laureates per capita than anyway.
Yes, I recognize that.
That's for a
Never
reason.
mind, we
That's
adopted one in Trinidad. Never mind, we had one of them adopted in Trinidad. So you don't laugh too loudly.
Noted. Okay, guys, let's move on to question 3, and the individual will type it in the chat. And it says for a collab. There you have to submit me.
We just did this.
Yep.
Oh, Francila Solomon, I believe.
Somebody was ahead of the game, Desmond. You lost.
But Francila, I think Francila was the first I saw.
Yes, Francila is the first after it's been typed in the chat.
After it has been posted, yes.
All right.
So, man, boy, a little too quick to the draw. But
so, and Francilia is also St. Lucia. Francilia, tell us, but I think I know Francilia is St. Lucian too. Francilia, tell us. St. Lucian? Yes.
Yes, St. Lucia.
Oh, where the Trinidadians? Where the Dominicans?
Well, we only have 2. I mean, if you throw everything in a hat, we only have 2. What is that? Okay. The red ball experiment? Is it Devendra? Red balls and white balls?
Red bead experiment.
Red bead and white.
Red bead experiment.
The bead experiment. That's right.
Red bead. Red bead.
This is the red bead experiment here. So.
Right. Okay. So last question. And Devendra, that will be question item number 4.
Hold on.
Okay.
I need to pull up. All right. No. I'm not putting the link to the book just yet. Huh?
Yes, so it's coming up. Yes, so let's do that. So let's
Okay.
do the item number 4. There it is. Item number 4. Focus on item number 4. And
All
item
right,
number
and-
4 is related to my book. Remember, I wrote a book. And in Betty's book based on quality management entitled Roseback, Working for Repeat Business, what does BSC represent? And I sent an email to all registrants this morning, and they would have noted that in the signature, the whole Roseback acronym or mnemonic was spelled out. So let's see, what does the BSC stand for?
So
And
go
be
into your
specific, huh?
emails, fly into your emails quickly.
Those
of you
people
with
doing
quick
that.
and nimble
Okay, I like
fingers.
that. People going into their emails.
Fly into the emails to see what
And
BSC
David, you
stands
want them to get it right, eh? Where
Yeah,
there's
the
a plural,
spelling
there's a
has to
plural.
be correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So we're looking at
Ah, look at this.
Aha,
background
Naomi.
Ah,
standards communication. There we
yes.
go. We have a winner far ahead of the
Well
pack.
done. Naomi
Far
Jean,
ahead
well
of the pack.
done. Well done. Naomi, where are you coming from? Oh,
St. Lucia. A clean sweep. A clean
And-
sweep.
And let me guess,
Background
she probably
standards
has the
commission.
book as well.
you know, you see, my St. Lucians have rolls back.
Right.
Well done, St. Lucia. Very proud of you. You warm my heart today. You warm my heart today. Okay, so David, also, could you put the link to the book, the book on Amazon for people who are interested? This is based on quality management, and it has been kept as simple as possible. You cannot get it simpler than that. Okay, and Devendra has added that to the chat. Thank you so much, Devendra. And okay, and
We
so
still have
we move
responses
on.
coming in. Eh? You can see that we still have responses coming in.
They're just checking their emails.
No, maybe.
And we turn over to Zenf at this point.
This was the third and last of the free webinars. Upcoming, we will have the webinars for the winners of the competition. And of course, you can look out for any upcoming ones in other quality related topics. And I would like to thank everyone for attending this webinar. And before even I proceed, you would have learned quite a lot from this webinar and about the customer and how the customer experience is important. And we would like you to type in your feedback because customer feedback is extremely important. That's how we can improve on what we do. So please type in your feedback whilst I speak into the chat. We would appreciate that very much. And so we'd like to thank you once again. We hope the information that was given today, you will use it to improve on your processes, to enhance the experience of your customers. We would like to thank the facilitators, Mrs. Betty Comby from Moz Inc. and Mr. Patrick and Devendra from Quality Plus Consultants for bringing this free webinar to you. And again, of course, we would like to thank our collaborators, the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards and the NCPC. And as Betty said, just remember, I love this one. If you care, you document.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, we have to. Yeah, I agree. You have to trademark this, trademark. If you
Yes.
care, we need to put it on mugs. If you care, you document.